皆さんおはようございま
Good
す。
morning,
こんにちは。
good
そしてこんばん
afternoon,
は。
and good
本日
evening,
は
everyone.
我々グローバル
Thank you for joining
フォー
us
エデュケーション
today at the event hosted
来年
by Global Partnership
9.1
for
から
Education.
21年、ア
21
フガニ
years
スタンの女子
after
教育のため
9/11,
に日本は
what
何
should
ができるの
Japan
か
do
にご
now
参加
to
いただき、
promote girls'
誠にありがとう
education
ござ
in
います。
Afghanistan?
本日モデレーターを務めます
I am Mio-chan,
GPE ユースのみおちゃ
a
んです。
GPE youth, and I will be moderating today's session.
です。我々は
I'm
GP のユ
Tomo-chan,
ースとし
also
て
a GP
約
youth.
18
As GP
ユー
youth,
スリーダーと
we are
共に
working
すべての子
together
供たち
with
が
youth leaders
高い
from
教育を
18
受けられる社
countries
会を
around the world
実現するよう
to
に
achieve a
行
society
っており
where
ま
all
す。
children can receive a
は
quality
2001年
education.
に世界銀行によって
GP
設
was
立された
established in
問題に特化し
2002
た世界
under
最
the
大の国際
initiative of the World Bank and is the world's largest international foundation dedicated
本
to
日の
education
イベ
issues.
ントはタイトルの通り
As the
9.11 か
title
ら
of today's
21
event suggests,
アフガニスタンの女子教育の
20 years
ために
after
日本は何ができる
9/11,
のか、
would
皆さ
like
んと
to
一緒に
discuss with
考
you
えたいと思って
what
おります。
Japan can
ま
do
ず、こ
for
のイベントを
girls'
開催
education
した背
in
景を
Afghanistan.
ください。
First of all,
昨年、
let
イ
me
ギリスにて
explain the
開催された
background of this
20の
event.
女子教育に関する会
Japan
議で日本
agreed
は
to the
合意しました。
declaration on girls'
しかしなが
education
ら、
at the
その
G7
翌月
meeting
に行
held
わ
in
れた
UK last year.
GPE の上司
However,
会合で、
Japan
日本
was
だ
the
けが
only
唯一
country
女
that
子
did
教育
not
に
specify the
2021年の女
amount
子教
of
育を明
GP
示しました。
contribution,
今
including
年、ドイツで
support
開催
for
され
girls'
た
education.
G7 のコミュニティに
As
お
the
いても、
GP
教育への
replenishment
コミットメン
meeting
トを強化
holds
す
the
ること
following
が
ones.
明言されております。
At the
来年
GP
G7 の議
community
長国と
meeting
なる日本
held
は、
in
女子
Germany
教
this
育に
year,
関する宣
upholding a
言のコミッ
commitment
ト
to
メント
girls'
は果たす
education
と、
was clearly
他の
stated.
G7 国だけでな
As the
く、
G7 chair
議長国
next
である
year,
パートナー国
Japan
も期
is
待しています。
expected to fulfill this commitment to
そ
the
のために我
declaration
々
of
はこの
girls'
イベントを開
education,
催すること
not
を通
only
じ
by
て、
the other
教育支援、
G7 countries, but
特に
also
子育
by
て権利につい
other
ても触れていて、さらなる支援が必要
partner countries.
だと
For example, holding
考
this
えられる
event focused on girls'
アフガニスタ
education
ン
in
の女子教
Afghanistan,
育に効果
which is
する
restricted under
GPE
the
を通じた
Taliban
教育
regime,
支援
and
の
in
可能
need
性を
for
理解する
further
とともに、
support and
日
raise
本政府は
awareness
何ができ
the
るのか、
need for education
は
supports
日本
through
国民と
GPE,
して
would
この
like to think
GPA 支援
what
に
the
よって
Japanese
ど
government
のよ
can
うな
do,
提言をし
what
たらいいか、
recommendation
皆
we
さん
as
と一緒に
Japanese
考
citizens
えた
should
いと
make
思
for
ってい
Japanese
ます。
ODA. Here's today's agenda. This
こちらはこ
event
ちら
will
です。
consist
本
of
イ
two
ベント
parts.
は第
In the
1部、
first
第
part,
2
we
部
will
の
hear messages
中継に
from
なっ
the
ています。
Japanese members
第
of
1部では
parliaments,
日本の国会議員に
experts,
ついて
and Afghan youth.
やアフガニスタンの若者からのお話を伺います。
The second part
第
will be
2
a
部では少
small
人数
group
でのディスカッシ
discussion.
ョンを実施する予定です。
As
本イベント
announced
の
in
冒
the
頭チ
chat
ャッ
at
ト
the
にてお
beginning,
知らせいたしまし
this
たが、
event
この
will
イ
be
ベントは
held
日
in
本語
both
と英語
English
を
and Japanese.
しております。
Please
アメリカ
select
の
your
国の
preferred
方
language by
に
clicking
ご
on the
添えてください。
interpretation button at the
こ
bottom
ちら
of the
はクラス
screen.
A から B ということで、
Please use the Q&A section
我
for
々
your
からの
question.
説明はこれぐらい
That's
と
all
して、
about the
次はアフガ
introduction
ニスタン
from
の
us.
出身の若者
Now,
の
please
声
listen to the voice of the youth from Afghanistan.
I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for holding this gathering on Afghan girls' education and giving me the chance to speak and be a voice on behalf of millions of Afghan girls who are imprisoned in their houses right now in Afghanistan. I am an Afghan girl who has the experience of living as a refugee in Iran. I grew up there and in 2003 returned to Afghanistan in the hope of living a life with all of our rights, especially the right to education. The situation was tough for us to continue our education in Iran because there were various barriers for Afghan refugees. However, the situation was not so good in the first years after the fall of the Taliban because there were still old-fashioned thoughts about women and girls in Afghanistan. Some families didn't allow their girls to go to school. Moreover, parents had enrolled their girl in homeschooling classes to become tailor in the future and work indoors, not outside. In spite of these thoughts, I'm blessed with parents who have supported us to continue our education. Therefore, I could complete high school in my hometown and enter Kabul University in 2007. To the best of my knowledge, I was the first girl in our neighborhood who could enter the university after the fall of the Taliban. It was taboo to send a girl alone to another city to continue her education at that time, but my parents were insistent about girls' education and gave me their support and their strength for continuing. People around us could see the miracle of education over time by seeing our family's girls' progress. Because my sisters and I worked outside and were economically independent. Besides, we supported the family financially. Recent years, have witnessed many people in our neighborhood change their mind and send their girls to schools and universities. I am proud of myself for being a motivation for these changes. In 2015, I came to Japan to continue my education. I could successfully get my master and PhD degrees here. Besides academic achievements, I was able to shape my mind and set greater goals for the future. One of my goals in future is to financially support Afghan girls to continue their education. Reviewing my background, it is obvious that education can brighten everyone's future and past. Education plays an important role in peace building and getting out of war and poverty in third world countries, especially in Afghanistan. Moreover, the girls' education is the most important matter for the development of society and reaching gender equality. In my opinion, girls and women can change the future and make the world a better place because they are the mothers of the future. Educated mothers can raise educated children with greater goals and minds. Education was the last hope for Afghan girls to get rid of their suffering and inequality during these 21 years. But sadly, this hope and right has been taken away from them after the takeover of the Taliban and their dreams fall apart. This situation has mounted the risk for Afghan girls, such as early marriage, sexual abuse, violence, and exploitation. Therefore, I humbly solicit the Japanese government and international community to support education in Afghanistan, particularly girls' education through global education partnership programs. Moreover, I would like to say on behalf of Afghan girls, don't forget Afghan girls and women in Afghanistan. Hear our voice, spread it, stand by our side and support us. My hope and wish is to see Afghanistan in peace, Afghan children, Afghan women and girls. In one word, Afghanistan free and happy. I hope there would be no more suffering and poverty in Afghanistan in the light of education. Thank you for your time and attention.
Today, I find this chance and opportunity to record and share the problems that girls students have in Afghanistan and they are not allowed to go to school. The main focus in this program or the main concentration is on girls, that what problems or difficulties girls have with going to school. So I want to share or tell you some points, then we come to the solution, and after that, okay, so possible to give you some examples. The first one, as we all know, ladies or girls students do not have any kind of access in educational part or section. Ladies are not allowed to go to school. Schools are banned completely for them, and there is no opportunity that they should continue their education and have a very bright future or clear future, make their future well. Second one that I want to tell you, that is gender discrimination, that unfortunately in Afghanistan most of our people are uneducated and they're very pessimist, not optimist about their daughters, about girls students. They give value, or they value to boys students more than girls. They think that girls must stay at home and do the housework And if they study again, no matter, just they can study up to 12th grade and not more than that one. It means it's not good that ladies or girls students should complete their bachelor degree, get their bachelor degree, and it is unfortunately a really negative point and negative thought that our people have. The third one in here, I just blame parents as well, that parents are also responsible for this one. We have some parents that they do not let their daughters study. They think that girls are good or for just staying at home and helping their parents, serve their brothers, and good to get married after some years and just pass their life like this. And that's why most of our girls are uneducated. They do not go to school, and they have these limitations and constraints.
次は日本の国会議員の先生からのメッ
Next,
セージをご覧
please
くだ
watch
さい。
the messages from the Japanese members of parliament.
多くの
We
国会議員
received video messages of support from many members of parliament for this
すべ
event.
ての順番に自民党の河
In
村
alphabetical order, we have messages from Mr. Masahiro Komura, MP of the Liberal Democratic Party, Mr. Masaki Taniai, MP of the New Komeito Party, and Mr. Tomohiro Yamamoto, MP of the Liberal Democratic Party.
9.11か
I
ら
am
2001年
Masahiro
アフガニスタンの
Komura, a member of the
日
House of
本
Representatives.
は何ができるのかという
I'd like to express sincere gratitude for hosting this truly meaningful event 20 years after 9/11. What should Japan do to promote girls' education in Afghanistan? As a father myself with daughters in 6th and 4th grades, I feel the joy of seeing my children gain something through their studies every day. In the midst of this, I feel the great sense of crisis that Afghan women are being deprived of opportunities to study. Japanese government is having difficulty providing various supports under the current Taliban regime. But with the GP members, I'd like to continue to seriously consider how we can support together. Lastly, I'd like to end my remarks with sincere wishes for the fruitful results of today's event and offer my congratulations.
皆さん、こんにちは。
Hello
公
everyone.
明党参議院議員の
I'm Masaaki Taniai, a member of House of Councillors of New Komeito Party. Today, I'd like to express my sincere respect for the online symposium hosted by GP Youth Ambassador Japan on 21 years after 9/11. What should Japan do now to promote girls' education in Afghanistan? I'm currently serving as a chairperson of International Committee of Komeito and was first elected in 2004. Before that, I worked for nearly 4 years in refugee camp as an employee of AMDR, an international medical NGO headquartered in Okayama. I was an employee of AMDR at the time of 9/11, 21 years ago, and was engaged in relief activities at an Afghan refugee camp in Quetta, Pakistan. I'm particularly interested in today's theme. After becoming a member of parliament, I also visited a Syrian refugee camp and Gaza in Palestine. Based on these visits, I made policy proposals to the Japanese government to establish a program to accept Syrian refugee students and to invite school teachers from Gaza to Japan. And these proposals were realized because I believe that education is the key to reconstruction.
本日9月11日でありますけども、
Today,
まさに
on September 11,
から
I'm leaving for
ポーラ
Poland,
ンド、またモルドバ、ウクライナ
Moldova, and Ukraine in order to assess the latest needs of Ukrainian refugees, not only for humanitarian, but also for reconstruction assistance.
しかし、そのウクライナにつきまし
However,
てもですね、だいぶ
it
関
seems
心
that
が
interest
薄
in
らいでい
Ukraine
る
is
ようです。
waning in Japan.
日本にとって一番
I
辛いこ
believe
と
that
は、
hardest
誰から
thing
も
for
感謝を受けて
refugees
いない、
is to be
誰からも必要とされ
unnoticed,
ていない、そして
unneeded,
やがて
and
忘れられてい
eventually
るとい
forgotten.
うことだと私は思います。ですから、日本の若い世代の
Therefore,
皆様
I
方
think
が
it is
アフガニスタ
wonderful
ンの
that
特
younger
に
generation like you
困難を
is
極める
discussing and showing the
この
interest
女子
in
教育についてです
Afghanistan,
ね、
especially
を
in
伝え
girls'
る関心
education,
を持っている
which
という
is
ことは大変素晴
extremely
らしいことだと
difficult.
私は思っています。日本政
The
府はこれ
Japanese
までア
government
フガン復興に
has been actively
積極
involved
的に
in the
関わって
reconstruction
まい
of
りました。
Afghanistan.
タリバン
It
が
has been
実
a
権を握って
year
から1
since the
年経ちま
Taliban
した。
took control of the
大変、
country.
貧乏危機
I
は
am aware
深
that
刻さを
this
増している
humanitarian
認
crisis
識
is
しています。
becoming
そういう
increasingly
時だからこ
serious,
そ、
and
科
it is
学に光を
precisely
当てるべ
at
き
a
で、
time like this
また、
that we should shine a
このよう
light
な
on
これに特
education.
化した国際機
We
関とも
also
です
need
ね、
to work
しっかり
closely
連携
with
していく
international
必要があると思いま
organizations
す。
that specialize in education,
いただ
such
きたい
as
と
the
思います。
GPE.
また、学校に対する、学校の先生に対する支援や、
We can think
学
of
校の施
various
設、
ways to support education for
教材の
girls,
開発、
support for
さら
school
には、
teachers, development
私
of
たち
school
の日本
facilities
への
and
招待、
teaching
留学など、
materials, as
さ
well
まざま
as
なことが
inviting young people
考
to
えら
Japan
れる
to
と思いま
study
すけれども、
abroad.
ぜひ、今日の
I
ディ
would
スカッション
like
の中
to
で、
encourage
方
all of
々も
you
ですね、
to actively
に
participate in today's
いろいろなア
discussion
イデアを出してい
for a
ただきたいと
variety
い
of
うふうに思います。
ideas.
国会議員としてこうした
As a
そうした
member
です
of
ね、
parliament, I would like to
提
take
言をし
these
っかりと受け止め
discussions
て、
and proposals and
進め
reflect
ていき
them
たいと
in
思い
national
ます。
politics.
最後になりますけども、
Last
こうした
but not
人道
least,
支援
the
と
reason
い
why we
うのは
provide such
な
humanitarian
ぜ必要なの
assistance
か、それは一つ
is
は
to build
国際
international order,
秩序の構築であり、また国際
to
環境
improve
の
the international environment,
また法の支配の確
and
立、
to
こうした
establish the
点において
rule
もですね、
of
大変
law,
重要な意味があり
which
ま
are
す。
very
このこ
important.
とをしっかり認識した上でですね、
Based on this understanding, I'd like to think carefully
何ができるの
about
か、
what we can do for girls'
しっ
education
かりと考
in
えていきたいと
Afghanistan.
思います。本日はこの開催につき
I'd
まし
like
て、
to congratulate you all for holding this event today in concluding my remarks. Thank you very much.
自民党所属衆議院議員の山本智
Good
弘です。
evening, everyone. I'm Tomohiro Yamamoto, member of the House of Representatives, the beloved Democratic Party. Today, organized by GPE Youth, looking back 21 years since 9/11, you are going to discuss various issues on girls' education in Afghanistan, I heard. On 9/11, 2001, on that day, I was in the United States. I saw the Pentagon and fire with my own eyes. The scene still vividly remains in my mind as if it were just yesterday. Since then, Afghanistan has had hardships and suffering greatly, and now Taliban regime is ruling the country. Discrimination against women, girls cannot go to school, and many other issues are happening. And I express my respect to you as GPE member and others for working so hard to support Afghan people. And today you will hear many stories from various experts and we'll have discussion later on. So please share with us what you will discuss today and make good suggestions. And we would be very happy to propose them to the Japanese government or think about in what way the Japanese government and our party can work together. Universal values, freedom, democracy, rule of law, educating people who truly respect those values is very important. In order to create such opportunities, I hope that all of you will have fruitful discussion today. And let me conclude my message by sincerely hope that you will be filled with meaningful opportunity and experience today. Thank you very much. Parliament members, thank you for your messages. For the current situation in Afghanistan, what we as Japanese citizens can do, We will discuss with members of GPEUs, and we want to deliver what we will learn today to the next stage. And next, for clear understanding about education in Afghanistan, Associate Professor Yuji Utsumi, Graduate School of International Development at Nagoya University, will talk with the theme of education system in Afghanistan, the path forward, the restoration of education over the 20 years. Professor Utsumi worked for UNESCO and UNICEF, spending 7 years in building education operation information system and developing the plan for the education sector. Now, his focus are mainly Afghanistan and East Timor, doing the research on education and work, effectiveness of school education, comparison of education. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yuji Utsumi from Nagoya University. I'm very honored to be invited to GPEU session today. I will talk with the theme of education system in Afghanistan from 2001, when Afghanistan got out of the control by Taliban regime, to 2021, when the Taliban regained the power. In 10 minutes, explaining how Afghanistan education has been restored over the 20 years. First, focusing on the year before 2001, when the former Taliban regime ruled Afghanistan. For this period, how Taliban ruled the country. The former Taliban regime suddenly appeared in 1994 near the border with Pakistan at the refugee camps. And they began to arm themselves and rapidly expanded control in Afghanistan, where conflict was lingering. By 1999, they controlled about 90% of Afghanistan. The Taliban was an extreme fundamentalist group with very strict and repressive rule. On this slide, for example, the crime of theft was punished by cutting off wrists, and entertainment such as movies and music were all prohibited. Men were forced to grow a beard up to a certain number of centimeters and were actually measured. Especially women's human rights were severely violated. Women were not allowed to be employed or receive education. Here you see a blue-colored dress called burqa. Without wearing this, women were not allowed to go out. With a serious human rights violation against the women, people were really suffering in daily life. And then in 2001, 9/11 terrorist attacks in the United States. US invaded in Afghanistan, and the Taliban regime quickly collapsed. After that, the Afghanistan government had been working on reconstruction until 2021. During this period, however, it was not peaceful, except the first 2 years. The Taliban forces fled to the Pakistani side, reassembled, and had conflict with the government for a long time. Left bottom on the side is the number of refugees, and right bottom is the number of people killed in the conflict. At the end of 2004, there was official presidential election. Presidential elections were conducted in 2009 and 2014. Every 5 years, the conflict grew bigger and bigger. Especially in 2009, the number of US troops was increased and the deaths of US military reached its peak. The fighting was getting intensified. We saw a huge increase in the number of refugees from Afghanistan. After the withdrawal of US forces in 2021, the Taliban was in power again. Afghanistan has been in conflict for the last 20 years, and the conflict imposed great impact on the education sector, being in restoration. The Taliban left night letters, the threatening letters, in people's houses at night, This is to make people feel that they were being watched by someone else at all times, threatening them not to send their daughters to schools or not to cooperate with the current government. And there were attacks on schools frequently, especially rocket attacks against girls' schools. Students and teachers were killed frequently. In 2009, there was a presidential election. As the schools were used for this election, more than 600 schools were attacked during the year. This is a situation where about 3 attacks happened every day at some schools in the country. After that, the number of attacks were getting down. However, every 5 years of the election, the number of attacks increased. There were 100 attacks on school per year. This is like every 3 days, some schools were attacked. Even in the midst of reconstruction efforts, Afghan children were risking their lives to go to school. Under this very difficult situation, international society and the Afghan community worked very hard in cooperation and achieved significant educational restoration over the 20 years. This graph above shows the total enrollment rate in primary education by gender. Immediately after the fall of the Taliban regime in 2002, school opened again, and then total enrollment rate has increased rapidly. The rate for boys has increased to over 120%. The rate for girls is a little lower. However, the enrollment rate for primary education exceeds 80%. The graph below shows a total enrollment rate for secondary education. It started to increase around 2010. The rate for girls in particular is still very low, at less than 40% with the latest figure. The international community made a great effort to improve girls' education, but Taliban gained power last year. Then girls' education has been stopped. This is how the restoration of education in Afghanistan has been proceeded. Enormous amount of support was given from the international community. As of 2018, the Afghanistan's government expenditure on education was about $580 million, which is about 79 billion yen at current rate. About half of that, or $290 million, was actually funded by ODA from various countries. This amount is only for education sector. Other sectors also received a great deal of support. In addition to this bilateral aid as ODA, a large amount of multilateral aid was provided to Afghanistan through the EU, UN agency, and other international organizations. The total amount of support for the education sector over the 20 years has reached $4.4 billion, which is over 600 billion yen, according to the OECD database. The Japanese government had also made a great contribution, accounting for about 9% of the total. The Japan's aid was about 53 billion yen, only for the education sector. And a large number of aid was provided to other sectors, so Japan is a large donor. Over the past 20 years, the international community was united to support education in Afghanistan. With this amount of aid from the international community, tremendous number of projects were conducted. Decision of allocation. Where and how much aid should be allocated in the education sector? The Afghan Ministry of Education, as the central government, expected to do so to this work and to be independent in the future. However, at the beginning, they didn't have sufficient capacity. Therefore, as you see in the slide blue, support was given to improve the capacity of the ministry. develop the plan for the education sector, reform the education system in line with the mid to long-term education plan, analyze the situation of education, coordination with various stakeholders. These are very important in improving their governance capacity, which actually means that people working for the Ministry of Education enhance their capacity in performing tasks, and their knowledges and experience will be passed even when those people changed. And the Taliban is now taking control. However, important things here is that they have officials nurtured by international community with great capacity. Some of them may have fled to other countries or are still in Afghanistan. However, they are precious human resources for Afghanistan for maintaining the education system. They need to have continued support from international community moving forward. An educational project over the last 20 years has changed way of thinking in various local communities, which includes the importance of education for both boys and girls. Schools should be protected together with the local communities. Those perceptions were about to be rooted in the community. Just then, Taliban regained the control. So I think our continued commitment to the local community will be very important. And the framework of multilateral support established over the years has great reason to be there. Therefore, maintaining this framework together with people from a Ministry of Education will be crucial for future education in Afghanistan. Lastly, what we can do is to always remember the people in Afghanistan. From last August to today, many things happened in the world. However, things newly happen will not replace the old ones, and old are still important. Ongoing challenges and issues in Afghanistan are very important. So let me emphasize that we should never forget about this. That's all for my talk about the education system in Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Utsumi, for your valuable lecture. With concrete data in the presentation, I was able to understand that after the fall of Taliban regime in 2001, the school enrollment rate increased dramatically thanks to educational support. I was very much impressed by his last words that just because something new has happened, it does not mean that old one is no longer important. Next, Mr. Javier Luque, GPE Senior Education Specialist, will talk about education challenges in Afghanistan and GPE's support. Mr. Luque is currently in charge of Afghanistan at GPE and has held several positions, including Senior Education Specialist at the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the International Monetary Fund. I hand this over to Mr. Luque.
Let me start introducing myself. I am Javier Alfonso Luque, the country team lead for Afghanistan at the Global Partnership for Education. Let me start sharing my presentation. Okay, so my presentation will be on Afghanistan and the Global Partnership for Education. Let me start with a brief introduction to the Global Partnership for Education. GPE is the largest global fund solely dedicated to transforming education in lower income countries and a unique multi-stakeholder partnership. We work to deliver quality education so that every girl and boy can have hope, opportunity, and agency. Our vision is a quality education for every child. Our mission is to mobilize partnerships and investments that transform education systems in lower income countries, leaving no one behind. Our goal is to accelerate access, learning, outcomes, and gender equality through equitable, inclusive, and resilient education systems fit for the 21st century. How do we work? As a partnership, GPE brings together multilateral institutions, civil society, teacher representatives, philanthropic foundations, and the private sector behind partner countries' government plans. As a fund, GPE provides financing to catalyze reforms and support national action and commitment. We receive resources from our donor countries like Japan, and we channel them through our member countries. At the local level, we try to replicate that structure. In all countries, there is a local education group that, under the leadership of the government, brings together the stakeholders in the education sector. Japan, usually through the participation of JICA, is a member of different local education groups around the world. We channel our grants to the areas identified by the local education group. Active participation in the local education group of partners ensures alignment between the intervention of different partners and contributes to education policy stability. Afghanistan is a member of GPE since 2011. Partners have collaborated through the local education group with the authorities to elaborate the different national sector plans and the overall policy implementation under the leadership of the Afghanistan government until August 2021. During this period, EP has supported the government with the following grants: a program development grant for 55 million US dollars that was implemented by UNICEF, an accelerated funding grant for approximately 22 million US dollars that was implemented by UNICEF, an accelerated funding grant to address the COVID emergency for $11 million implemented by UNICEF, and a grant for 120 million US dollars that was being implemented by the World Bank, but that was stopped due to the fallout of the government after the Taliban takeover. The grants have supported the positive education of the education system in Afghanistan in the recent years. This positive evolution started after 2001. Enrollment grew significantly until 2019. For boys, it grew from 700,000 in the year 2000 to more than 4 million in the year 2019 for primary education, while it grew from less than 500,000 in 2001 to 2 million in 2018 for secondary education. In the case of girls, enrollment went up from almost zero in 2001 to 2.7 million in 2019 for primary education, and from zero to 1.1 million in secondary education during the same period. The positive education attainment has allowed an acceleration of the education attainment of the Afghanistan population to more than 6 years on average for males and 3 years of education on average for female in 2015. Note that still these numbers are quite low, as in Japan, the years of education on average in the adult population is 13 years. The increase in enrollment post-year 2000 explain this acceleration in the trend of education attainment that we observe in the graph. That trend, that's this positive education trend, attainment trend, was reshaping the labor market in Afghanistan. Nonetheless, despite this improvement, the education system still faces important challenges. As we have observed, there were significant differences in attainment between boys and girls, and in males and females later on. Moreover, a study of the World Bank in 2017 found that the average learning outcome performance of a grade 4 student is around a grade 1 level. In this graph, we observe how many fourth graders did not master the fourth grade curriculum. For example, only 27% of students could perform a 3-digit addition, or 7.8 of students could perform a simple area calculation. But there was a pathway to address those challenges, with major efforts to improve the service delivery under the leadership of the government at the time, and with the support of the Global Partnership for Education and other donors. This effort from the global community aimed to improve learning outcomes and attendance in the country. GP supported these efforts with a special focus on increasing girls' enrollment in education, especially in rural areas. Unfortunately, the education system was affected by the COVID crisis and later on by the Taliban takeover of the government, stopping this positive evolution, especially for girls at the secondary education level. As we know, the Taliban has established a de facto ban on girls' attendance to secondary education. Unfortunately, if the ban is not lifted soon, the current generation of girls will see their lifetime opportunities seriously affected. According to UNICEF, the ban could translate in a loss of $1.3 billion for the cohort of the affected girls. And unfortunately, the consequences will be dynamic and extend through time. There will not be female teachers or female doctors to attend girls and women, affecting their capacity to increase their potential human capital later on. GPE and the donor community reacted immediately after the crisis started. Our major concerns were on how to stop the system from collapsing and losing all the gains obtained in the last 20 years, how to ensure that the curriculum remains adequate, and of course, how to promote girls' return to education. The Global Partnership for Education reacted also by implementing our guidelines for fragile and conflict-affected contexts. These guidelines require that partners remain active, and in this case, without the de facto government participation in the local education group. And to receive additional GPE resources, we require partners to elaborate an action plan. Also, the GPE announced that we have resources available for Afghanistan for a total of $300 million to be invested till 2025. Partners reacted quickly and developed the Afghanistan Education Transitional Framework. This is their plan, what they think should be done in the short term. The plan is quite ambitious, with three clear goals on access, quality, and sustaining the education system. In this slide, we could appreciate the richness of the plan and the different activities that are included in, for example, community-based education, Tibet, teaching and professional development. And it's also important to mention that partners are concerned on the need of having data and monitoring to guarantee that the plan, to monitor the quality of the implementation of the plan. Let me finalize with some closing remarks. First, there is a major risk that Afghanistan loses the enormous progress achieved in the past 20 years by its education sector. Second, the ban on girls will have an important consequences. The ban on girls' education attendance will have important consequences for their development, as well as economic consequences for the country. Third, partners have reconvened fast and put together a strategy to support the education sector. The active participation of of all partners in the development partner group is essential to maximize the impact of the different interventions. GP is accompanying the development partner groups throughout this process. We now are waiting the applications for GP grants under their current envelope for Afghanistan. And of course, GP will continue advocating for the end of the ban on girls' education and for quality education for all boys and girls in Afghanistan. Thank you. I wish you have a productive discussion. Bye.
ルケさん、大変
Thank you, Dr. Duque, for your insightful remarks. Next, we will hear a message from another Afghan youth member.
Hi, I'm Fatima Wajdi. I am a fourth-year student at the University of Virginia, and I study international affairs. Today, I would like to talk about how being an Afghan girl raised in the United States, I had the advantage of having access to education and resources with support and peace that was all around me. However, constantly visiting Afghanistan, I have seen hardships that many Afghan girls encounter and face as they not only lack proper access to education, but because of this lack of access to education, they are also encountering these cultural barriers and restrictions because of the new government that is taking place. So I must note that education for girls in Afghanistan is not only a fundamental human right that should be given, but it can help sustain Afghanistan as a nation economically, politically, culturally, and most importantly, peacefully. So the literacy rate in Afghanistan for women has been drastically low over the years due to this ongoing conflict, this political tension, and war. So such conflict has caused a struggle for gender equality, as it has led to cultural barriers and social norms that were heavily influenced by the Taliban, a lack of resources and knowledge in rural regions about women empowerment, and an absence of Afghan women participation in places such as the government, schools, hospitals. So it is critical to explore women's roles in such factors. And with that being said, I believe that the first step to promoting education for girls in Afghanistan is simple, and that is to simply support communities in Afghanistan that are attempting to fight such cultural barriers and that are attempting to fight for girls' rights to education. Many communities and Afghan people are trying to break these barriers for their children, and they are in desperate need of support from others, which is in this case the Japanese government. So simply educating others around you about the situation in Afghanistan and supporting your Afghan fellows is the least one can do. So what should Japan do, and what should the Japanese government do in order to promote girls' education in Afghanistan? From a more broader and general perspective, improving school infrastructure in rural areas and rehabilitating existing schools while educating females, Afghan women, to become female teachers, as that encourages women empowerment, are some of the several driving factors in pushing education to become more accessible to girls. And this is a long-term solution that should be assessed. And although it may require funding, support, and monitoring, the solution may be a sparking light on girls' education. And now you may be asking, how will education be promoted and assembled in Afghanistan in the longer term? I mean, this is not the first time someone is trying to implement a long-term strategy in Afghanistan. We have clearly witnessed last year how years of reconstruction and billions of aid was wiped drastically within seconds. So how can this be different? Well, according to Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, between 2002 and 2021, only 12% of reconstruction assistance by U.S. agencies was directed to the Afghan government. And most of the funds went to contractors to do jobs that should have been done by the Afghan government. Since more Afghans depended on these reconstruction assistance, more contractors were needed. So therefore, Afghans became dependent on aid. However, we need to understand that we must allow Afghans to prosper on their own in order to become self-sufficient. So for a long-term solution, we must understand and help out the Afghan people within itself to not become dependent on aid, but how we can allow them to carry on the developmental strategy. I believe education is the primary and most effective building block to peace and tranquility. The majority of the Afghan children and Afghan girls have only witnessed trauma, violence, and war. Afghan girls feel a sense of hopelessness and lack of enlightenment when they observe that the world is silent. It shouldn't be much to ask for, especially as a child, to simply want to learn. And still, many children in Afghanistan are yet facing the deficiency of proper education. Their only dream is to learn peacefully and to understand the world more clearly and to gain a sense of purpose. Therefore, I strongly urge the Japanese government to take action. We have witnessed that change does not occur through military force or direct intervention, but through implementing a developmental and systematic plan that will stay in place while understanding the Afghan people, the culture, their hopes, and bringing light to the problem. And I know this is not easy. It is more easier said than done. Very complex situation. However, this is a challenging humanitarian crisis that needs action, and I trust the Japanese government that initiative will take place. So I'm very glad to be here. Thank you very much, and I hope to see what will happen in the future.
ルケさん、アフガニスタンのユースの皆さん、あり
Mr.
がとうござ
Ke
いま
and
した。
other members from Afghanistan, thank you for your remarks. Finally, we will share with you the message from Ms. Shizuka Tedalder, Parliament member, as a closing remarks for the first session. Good afternoon. I'm Shizuka Tedalder, a member of House of Councillors. As the news coverage on Afghanistan is decreasing, my sincere respect and appreciation for GPEU's organizing this today. Supporting girls' education in developing countries is really important. Emergency humanitarian aid such as food, medical care, especially for pregnant and nursing mothers, are definitely necessary, as half of them loses their life every 2 hours. But the girl education is a radical solution for problems happening one after another, and very important to pave the way for local people to improve the situation by themselves. In the long run, this support will create a momentum to change the social environment for Afghan women whose access to education and freedom of movement are restricted. The security there is improving, so now is a time for long-term contribution in the field of education, especially for girls who are faced with many difficulties. Considering the GPE achievement in other countries, active engagement of Japanese government in the GPE activity has great significance. As a member of G7 with the third largest GDP in the world, Japan needs to show stronger presence in the contribution for basic education. As scientifically proved, we can expect higher returns for both developing countries and the people living there. The more we learn about the situation in Afghanistan, the more helpless you may feel, especially students. I'm a parliament member, however, I also feel irritating for not being able to reach out directly. Dr. Tetsu Nakamura in Afghanistan witnessed children brought to his clinics, dying one after another because of malnutrition. So he started agricultural support based on Japan's traditional technology, the irrigation system. The support is now saving lives and livelihoods of 650,000 people in Afghanistan. What we learned from Nakamura, Dr. Nakamura, strong passion and dedication of just one person can bring about huge potential. Support and consideration for Afghan people. In order to make it really happen, I will work with the Diet members to urge the Japanese government. I hope the discussion in the following session will be a meaningful one. Let me conclude my closing remarks for the first session. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Delada. Dr. Nakamura is one of the persons I truly respect. Medical service, infrastructure, political front, there are many approaches we can take. As Ms. Delada mentioned, I also feel emptiness when thinking about what I can do for Afghan people at the end. I was once told, remember people in Afghanistan and care about them is very important thing we can do. I hope this session will be a small step for moving forward. Whatever happens, we don't want to lose my hope, see the reality. I agree. I want to make my best effort to do something that I can do. Now, it's end of the first session. Let us move on to the second session. And thank you very much for joining the first session out of your busy schedule. And I would like to ask for your feedback as a reference for future session. Could you please fill in questionnaire to be shared with you later? Thank you very much.
皆様、本日はお忙しい中、GPE ユースイベント 9.11 から21年アフガニスタンの女子教育のために日本は何ができるのかにご参加いただきありがとうございました。第1部はこちらで。
Thank you very much for joining us here, and we provide the questionnaire, and so we'd appreciate your answers. And sorry about some audio issues at the beginning, and please join us here to answer questionnaires. We really appreciate your cooperation. Using the QR code attached or the URL here. At the end, we post our activities on SNS, so please feel free to visit our SNS. Thank you very much.